All right. So with that, we start with the third step prayer. Rob, if you'll help us out here.
My pleasure. Page 63 of your big book. I hope everybody's got a big book, a highlighter, a pen, and a piece of paper. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
Okay, we are on page 78. We're going through some different scenarios about making amends, and we're going to talk about that just a little bit. Before we get started here, just as a point of reference with regard to kind of how we do this, and this is something that we have, Rob and I've kind of worked through, and I've asked this question before, because if you look at it, it looks like you start your step 9 when you start your step 9 in the book. But what Bill has done is to pretty much set the stage for a step 9. And then in addition to that is now giving you some scenarios that you can go through, and it's really kind of like practice. Now, they're not going to be perfectly aligned with the kind of amends that you're going to be making, but what it's doing is it's preparing you for your step 9, so that when you're ready to do your step 9, you've had a little bit of practice. You've kind of gone through some thought processes around that. All right. Now, another thing, and I mentioned this before, with regard to kind of when you start your step 9. The idea is that when we get to our step 11, we do our morning meditation and we ask our higher power how best to approach the day. What are the things I want to get accomplished today? And at night, you have your quiet time, your prayer. You look back on your day and you see where you might have made a mistake, or where you could have done better, or what you did in fact do good, and that type of thing. It is our belief that that's the point in time, once you've kind of gone through your step 10 and you realize that at the moment that you've made a mistake, you immediately make that amend and say, hey, I didn't mean to do this, or hey, that wasn't the way I meant that to come out, or I didn't mean to do that. What can I do to make up for it? You're kind of already doing an amend, in a sense that you're doing it immediately. All right. So those are all kind of put together, but it is kind of waiting until you are fully prepared to do your step 9, so that you make it right. You don't make the mistakes that a lot of people do, where they jump in and they want to start saying, they want to start doing their step 9. And the first thing they do is they apologize and that type of thing. And we've already learned that, saying I'm sorry is not making an amend. It's just apologizing. And the point being is that wait until you've gone through this full portion of the book to practice your step 9s. You're gonna look at your list on your step 8, and then when you get to step 11, all right, when you are in the morning asking for guidance on how to go throughout your day, what are you going to do, that type of thing, that's when you're going to ask your higher power for that strength and that assistance to do a step 9. Maybe you're finally going to pick up the phone and call that one person that's, something that happened 2 years ago. Let's just make it a hypothetical scenario that you borrowed some money, you never paid it back, and it kind of got to be an argument. You've wronged this person, and that that's probably what they're going to be looking for, but you need to pick up the phone, call them, and say, hey, what can I do to make things right? So asking for guidance in the morning on your step 11, and then going through your day. And then at night, reviewing and making sure you did what you had planned to do, and if you had done it right. So you can start your step 9 as soon as you finish working through the book and the scenarios and that type of thing. But it's always good to get to at least your step 11, so that you know that you're going to be asking proactively, and I think active is the right word, actively asking for the guidance that you need and the strength that you want, so that you can go out and make a proper step 9 amend. Okay, when you make that proper amend, because you're armed with what the book has, you've talked to your sponsor, you've asked your higher power for the guidance and strength, and now you're kind of are ready to go, and the likelihood that you're going to be successful just goes up exponentially. That's kind of what we're looking at. So I've jumped ahead a little bit there. We'll kind of, if there's questions after the meeting and stuff, we can answer that. But nonetheless, that's kind of what our belief is, and kind of going through this as you kind of have yourself kind of prepared. And as a sponsor, this is just a way that we have interpreted the book as this is when it's good to do your step 9. It's always good to be as prepared as you possibly can, as practiced as you can, at getting that guidance and strength. All of that is going to be important to have a proper and successful step 9 or amend. All right, we are on page 78, and I'm going to ask Rob to move up one paragraph back to most alcoholics owe money. All right, let that gentleman in.
Okay, so page 78, everybody. And this is the second amend we're talking about, is for a creditor. Most alcoholics owe money. We do not dodge our creditors. Telling them what we're trying to do, we make no bones about our drinking. They usually know about it anyway, whether we think so or not. Nor are we afraid of disclosing our alcoholism on the theory it may cause financial harm. Approached in this way, the ruthless creditor will sometimes surprise us. Arranging the best deal we can, we let these people know we are sorry. Our drinking has made us slow to pay. We must lose our fear of creditors, no matter how far we have to go, for we are liable to drink if we are afraid to face them.
So this is also a time, remember when this book was written, it was a lot of people with their creditors were face-to-face type of creditors. They were local into their community. It might be the butcher, the baker, it could be the bar, it could be a diner, et cetera, et cetera. And you were usually worked out a line of credit with regard to the different establishments that you visited on a face-to-face, and you had a relationship kind of situation. Today, not so much. I mean, you might have a bank or somebody that somewhat well, but credit is different today than it was back then. Same concept, so it's not that, but it's just different because we're at a distance now. And when creditors come calling, it's normally a bank, or it's a automotive financial institution or something like that you may in fact owe money. It might be even utilities or something to that effect. A lot of these establishments or financial institutions have, payment plans when you get yourself behind, so as not to cut off your electricity or to repossess your car, etc. And those are important things to note. What we're trying to do is that, you want to own up to the fact that you owe the money, you've got behind, or you haven't made the payments that you should be making. Take it on head on, and find that guidance in your step 11. Remember, we talked about it, finding the guidance of what you want to do in the day, asking your higher power to help you find that strength and that ability to go to that person. Bottom line is that you don't want to shy away from these, because if these are hanging over you and they're causing you stress, they're causing the anxiety, a lot of drinkers will resort back to drinking because that's what is the easy thing to do. That's what they hide themselves behind the bottle, if you will. So very important point here as we go forward. Rob?
Yeah, which brings me back to, remember on page 25, there is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. You know, these things are holding us back, so we have to get over them.
Yep,
So
very good.
perhaps and now we're going to talk about criminal offenses. Perhaps we have committed a criminal offense, which might land us in jail if it were known to the authorities. We may be short in our accounts and unable to make good. We have already admitted this in confidence to another person, but we are sure we would be imprisoned or lose our job if it were known. Maybe it's only a petty offense, such as padding the expense account. Most of us have done that sort of thing.
All right, so this is one of those that are very sensitive. Let me just say that if you've gone out and done something, let's just call it egregious in regards to the law, it definitely needs some consultation. And your higher power is probably not the what I'm going to call the highest level that you should be consulting with. You maybe want to go out and find an attorney and talk to them about whatever that situation is, because you know this one's a tough one. The idea is that if it's in fact going to get you in trouble to the point that you might find yourself in jail, and now you're unable to fulfill your responsibilities and commitments to family and others and that type of thing because you now have no ability to make money, that just kind of compounds the problem. I think that this one's kind of similar to being careful about how much you actually are going to share with your wife or your parents or something like that, and where in fact it's going to cause harm where you're already trying to make some amends. So if it's petty, the fact is you will find yourself in a better situation if for some reason, let's just say it was something such as a shoplifting type of thing. Going back to that business and just admitting that you did that, being fully ready to pay for whatever it was and do whatever they've asked, chances are that business owner is probably gonna say one of two things: either that's all I need and let's just agree that you may not visit our store again because I don't want to take the chance again, or the other part of it is they may say the fact that you just came and talked to me, even though it's been a couple of years ago, it'll mess up my books if I take this money at this point, so let's just write it off and forget it, but thank you for telling me, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, those are just some possible outcomes and everything. But if it is something, in fact, that you're going to find that you might be imprisoned for, okay, again, this is, that really does beg the need to find an attorney. So it's just something you need to take advantage of in that regard before you go forward. And if you're a sponsor and you're hearing something like this, then it's a touchy subject and something that you probably should advise your sponsee to do and seek out the attorney. Rob?
Well stated, Leo. Now we're going to come to the fourth amend, alimony. Maybe we're divorced and have remarried, but haven't kept up the alimony to number one. She is indignant about it and has a warrant out for our arrest. That's a common form of trouble too. Although these reparations take innumerable form, there are some general principles which we find guiding. Reminding ourselves that we have decided to go to any length to find a spiritual experience, we ask that we be given strength and direction to do the right thing, no matter what the personal consequences may be. We may lose our position or reputation or face jail, but we are willing. We have to be. We must not shrink at anything.
Yeah, and that's where you find that inner strength, that higher power that's going to assist you with this. That's why it's so important to have had that spiritual experience at this point. And we'll go back up to the alimony payments and that type of thing. Absolutely, it's a pretty serious thing, but at the same time, most, let's call it courts or judges and that type of thing, they are, if there is a means to make restitution and be able to pay, you're just being obstinate or you're just having some trouble, they'll work some kind of payment plan out, because the last thing they want to do is take away your ability to pay that alimony altogether. And I mean, that may not always be the case, but certainly most of the cases are, if you are willing to admit your fault, admit the shortcoming, coming to the point of saying, hey, I make this much money, I can afford X, Y, or Z, and then working out a payment plan, then you can normally get through with this one fairly easily. All right. And that's a qualified easily, because obviously you're going to have to make sure that you stay true to your word. You're going to have to make those payments, and you're going to have to catch up. And this is not only the alimony, but child support. So it's in both of those categories that you're going to want to make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And after all, this is something that you put yourself into and you've agreed to, and you are, required to help these other people through the times that you're supposed to help them through after having had a divorce. Now, on to what Rob read just now, and that is reminding ourselves that we have decided to go to any lengths. And remember, we're not talking about taking off your clothes and running through the snow down the middle of a street to say, I'm willing to do that in order to make amends and make things right. We're talking about these very scenarios where you're going to actually approach somebody that you have wronged in some manner or fashion. And you have to have had, and this is so important, that spiritual experience. We ask to be given the strength. I've said that a number of times here, is where you're going to, in your step 11 that morning, you're going to ask for that guidance and that strength and that ability to face the day and face that amend that you're going to try and do that day. What kind of things you need to do, how you need to approach it, talking to your sponsor, and then no matter what the personal consequences may be. Obviously, there are a couple of steps you go through if it's something legal. And we encourage that. And sure, you may lose your position, your reputation, or face jail. A scenario had come up in mine. The person had it literally padded their expense account. They were found out, and they were at that point very senior. In this case, in the military, and they were asked to retire because of it. So. It is reality that you might actually find yourself in a situation where you've lost your position because of it. But as hard as that might be, the end result is you've made that amend. You are making yourself better. You're cleaning your side of the street. And as far as padding an expense account, meaning that you may have charged $10 for a meal, but then you go ahead and write in that you spent $20, therefore pocketing the $10 that you overcharged your company for. So instead of saying that it was 10, you said it was 20, and you put $10 in your pocket. So and you mustn't shy away from anything. If it's a difficult amend and you need some time, that's okay. Work on it, but make sure you're actively pursuing the steps and the courage and the right steps that you want to take in order to make that amend. Rob?
Very well stated. Usually, however, other people are involved. Therefore, we are not to be the hasty and foolish martyr who would needlessly sacrifice others to save himself from the alcohol pit. A man we know had remarried. Because of resentment and drinking, he had not paid alimony to his first wife. She was furious. She went to court and got an order for his arrest. He had commenced their way of life, had secured a position, and was getting his head above water. It would have been impressive heroics if he had walked up to the judge and said, "Here I am." We thought he ought to be willing to do that if necessary, but if he were in jail, he could provide nothing for either family. We suggested he write his first wife, admitting his faults and asking forgiveness. He did, and also sent a small amount of money. He told her what he would try to do in the future. He said he was perfectly willing to go to jail if she insisted. Of course, she did not, and the whole situation has long been adjusted.
Okay, so that really not much more to say. We've already talked about that, but that's exactly what we're after, standing up, admitting your faults, facing the problem, working out something with regard to forgiveness in this case, and a small amount of money, starting a payment plan. And normally, even if they're still a little leery, they're still a bit distrustful, and we've all been there, that it'll take some time. But if you continue to make those small payments and get yourself caught back up, then everything should be fine. So we'll keep going. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks. Before taking drastic action, we might implicate other people. We secure their consent. If we have obtained permission, have consulted with others, asked God to help, and the drastic step is indicated, we must not shrink.
Okay, so this is kind of one of those interesting kind of things. So far, we've been talking about you as an individual and making some kind of a wrong and then going out and trying to make a right. But if you were part of a group, let me just talk about maybe you were a guy that was a part of a group of guys that got yourself involved in something, and for whatever reason, you caused a problem as a group. And so far, everybody has kind of kept their mouth shut. They've not owned up to anything. There's been some dialogue about what happened, who did it, are we sure, that type of thing. And here you are about to come up and say, look, I'm going to go ahead and admit my part in this. And by doing so, you're going to implicate other people in that whole situation. So it's a touchy kind of subject there. It's something that you need to kind of look at. It's something that you need to consult with, maybe your sponsor's the right person to talk to. Maybe a lawyer is a person to talk to, or maybe it has to do with talking to the other people in the group saying, look, this is my situation. This is what I need to do, but I want to make sure that I've talked to you guys first, so that you're not blindsided by it. All right. And sometimes it's good, because work is a perfect scenario here. Something happened, the group is at fault. You're going to admit your fault, but you're going to do this to the and to the expense that your boss may not know. And by finding out through other channels, your boss is blindsided by it. It's usually a good idea to make sure that you've talked to the group, and then you go directly to your boss and say, hey, this is what happened. This is what I'm going to do. And this is what could happen here. That in and of itself is going to, you're going to find that it's better that they find out from you than it is that they're going to get blindsided by it. So it's, again, this is just some practice in regards to being prepared while you're doing your step 9. Rob?
And here we come to our 5th amendment, which is business. This brings to mind a story of one of our friends. While drinking, he accepted a sum of money from a bitterly hated business rival, giving him no receipt for it. He subsequently denied having received the money and used the incident as a basis for discrediting the man. He thus used his own wrongdoing as a means of destroying the reputation of another. In fact, his rival was ruined. He felt that he had done a wrong he could not possibly make right. If he opened that old affair, he was afraid it would destroy the reputation of his partner, disgrace his family, and take away his means of livelihood. What right had he to involve those dependent upon him? How could he possibly make a public statement exonerating his rival?
We'll keep going.
Continue?
Yep.
Okay. After consulting with his wife and partner, he came to the conclusion that it was better to take those risks than to stand before his creator guilty of such ruinous slander. He saw that he had to place the outcome in God's hands, or he would soon start drinking again, and all would be lost anyway. He attended church for the first time in many years. After the sermon, he quietly got up and made an explanation. His action met widespread approval, and today he is one of the most trusted citizens of his town. This all happened years ago.
So basically what we're doing is we've got a situation. It is going to potentially implicate and or create problems for people around you, in this case, family and work. that type of thing. And by going to those folks, you've gained their support, their acknowledgement, and they've given you, in a sense, they've kind of given you the permission you need. And permission's really not the right word, but they've given you an open door to be able to go out and make this amend, knowing what the problems could be. And one of the things I highlighted here is that he saw that he had to place the outcome in God's hands, or he would soon start drinking again and all would be lost anyhow. I highlighted that because that's really what you're trying to avoid. All right. The fact is, it's going to get tough. It could get hard. Things could have, it could take a long time to make this amend right and get everything back on its feet. But if you don't do it, it's going to hang over you. And going back to drink is absolutely the one thing you don't want to have happen. And it's going to ultimately destroy everything in the process. Rob?
Perfect. The chances are that we have domestic trouble. So this is 6 amend. Perhaps we're mixed up with women in a fashion we wouldn't care to have advertised. We doubt if, in this respect, alcoholics are fundamentally much worse than other people, but drinking does complicate sex relations in the home. After a few years with an alcoholic, a wife gets worn out, resentful, and uncommunicative. How could she be anything else? Thus begins to feel lonely, sorry for himself. He commences to look around at the nightclubs or their equivalent for something besides liquor. Perhaps he is having a secret and exciting affair with the girl who understands. In fairness, we must say that she may understand, but what are we going to do about a thing like that? A man so involved often feels very remorseful at times, especially if he is married to a loyal and courageous girl who has literally gone through hell for him.
Yeah, there's not a lot to say here other than the fact that this one's an easy one to ask your higher power what's the right thing to do. The fact is, you've got really 2 things here. One is that you're out doing extracurricular activities with another person and having a relationship that is morally wrong for so many reasons, and most of that is accepted throughout the world in that regard. The second thing, though, is that you've got a relationship that you've committed to above board, and here you are taking advantage of that in a way that could be incredibly harmful and is obviously dishonest and wrong. And it's important that you really face this one with some care and sensitivity going into it. So it's hard to say that what you're supposed to do in this situation. I'm going to say that, remember we talked about talking and telling people things that's you want to avoid creating additional harm and problems. I think it's best that you seek out some trusted and confident folks that are definitely have your back and are trying to get you to help you be on the right track. Sponsor, sure, clergy, maybe, etc. But it's an important one to kind of deal with. But I think that we all can sit here, raise our hand and say, what's the right thing to do? Well, ending that sordid relationship that you're having as an extracurricular affair should stop. And recommitting yourself to the relationship that you have with your wife or husband. In addition to that could end up being that that too much damage has occurred, there's too much distance and that type of thing, and maybe it ends up that you lose the relationship that with your spouse. It's just, gosh, this one's one of those that just has so many little tentacles coming off of it that could create so many problems. I think we kind of get it.
Remember, we've got our spiritual experience. Now we take it to God. What would He have us be?
Yeah.
He will direct us in the right way if we ask. Whatever the situation, we usually have to do something about it. If we are not sure our wife does not know, should we tell her? Not always, we think. If she knows in a general way that we have been wild, should we tell her in detail? Undoubtedly, we should admit our fault. She may insist on knowing all the particulars. She will want to know who the woman is and where she is. We feel we ought to say to her that we have no right to involve another person. We are sorry for what we have done, and God willing, it shall not be repeated. More than that, we cannot do. We have no right to go further. Though there may be justifiable exceptions, and though we wish to lay down no rule of any sort, we have often found this the best course to take.
Yeah, and that's just well said. We'll
Okay.
leave that one in case it is.
Our design for living is not a one-way street. It is as good for the wife as for the husband. If we can forget, so can she. It is better, however, that one does not needlessly name a person upon whom she can vent jealousy.
Yeah, and this may take some time. When it says if we can forget, so can she. Sometimes that's hard to do. Sometimes that's what takes the most time. Years, in fact, can go by with that eye of skepticism, and it's just something that we have to kind of work through and endure. I have experienced myself that those that I'm closest to are the ones that are the most supportive, but they're also the ones that are most skeptical. They are the ones that have been hurt the most, and so they want to make sure that you mean what you say and you do what you're going to do, and you do it for an extended period of time for them to start putting. I call it laying down your sword and shield and letting your guard down and allowing the good things to kind of flow between us, the two, the three, the four, whatever that might be. So it is going to take some time, but you certainly don't need to find other people outside of the relationship for there to be a lot of finger pointing and jabs and that type of thing, because then that just feeds that monster, if you will, and that continues on with jealousy. And jealousy is just a really bad thing to have, really. Rob?
Perhaps there are some cases where the utmost frankness is demanded. No outsider can appraise such an intimate situation. It may be that both will decide that the way of good sense and loving kindness is to let bygones be bygones. Each might pray about it, having the other one's happiness uppermost in mind. Keep it always in sight that we are dealing with that most terrible human emotion, jealousy. Good generalship may decide that the problem be attacked on the flank rather than risk a face-to-face combat.
Okay, so there is just another way of saying it. Let's see. Each might pray, and this is something to highlight here. Each might pray about it, having the other one's happiness uppermost in mind. We're not praying for ourselves here. We're praying for the other person. Okay, so that's something that you need to make a distinction for and keep in mind. And remember my threes, and that is the first thing is focus on the other person, focus on the customer. Okay, persuade them through involvement and earn the right to advance. Now, this is the part that gets really kind of touchy here, and that is keep always in sight that we are dealing with that most terrible human emotion, jealousy. That is a tough one. It creates all levels of negative energy and emotions, and it is something that is going to be tough. If you're a sponsor, you are usually well poised to be in a good position for your sponsee to confide in you about what they might do and how they might approach it, because you are, quote, a disinterested kind of third party. You should be objective in regards to these type of discussions and stuff. And I think that the best thing you can do, and this is a good test of a sponsor, is that you can be non-judgmental. All right. Remember, we've all been through some level of this, some way or another. And it isn't an uncommon thing to have happened. And so there can be a lot of jealousy, but kind of working it through with your sponsee this is where I think you kind of, earn your keep when it comes to being a sponsor, is that being that disinterested third party that is very objective and not subjective and not being judgmental. And it may be that the idea is going to be that there is it's touched upon lightly as opposed to being touched upon heavily and directly with all the details. The details are going to be what harms and hurts, and that's something that needs to be kind of handled very gently going into it. Rob?
If we have no such complication, there's plenty we should do at home. Sometimes we hear an alcoholic say that the only thing he needs to do is to keep sober. Certainly he must keep sober, for there will be no home if he doesn't. But he is yet a long way from making good to the wife or parents whom for years he has so shockingly treated. Passing all understanding is the patient mothers and wives have had with alcoholics. Had this not been so, many of us would have no homes today, would perhaps be dead.
Yeah, this is serious. Remember, alcoholism it does kill. It does stop life prematurely for whatever reason. So it has to be dealt with seriously. And sure, if the only thing you need to do is keep sober, we've talked about this early on. Just doing your steps 1, 2, or 3 and stopping there is not doing what you're supposed to be doing. You've got to commit to, you have to have that spiritual experience. You've got to get through all 12 steps, and you've got to work it so that you understand at a minimum, the first portion of this book inside and out. And I'm going to say this, the program that's outlined in the book is actually more than just the 12 steps. All right. So it is so much more. So when it's one thing to get, even then, getting through the 12 steps is great. That's a milestone and a great one. But understanding and absorbing and living what's in the rest of the book, in addition to those 12 steps, is also very, very important. This one is an important one. I did highlight that sometimes we hear an alcoholic say the only thing he needs to do is to keep sober. I mean, that is barely the minimum, barely. Rob?
The alcoholic is like a tornado, roaring his way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken, sweet relationships are dead, affections have been uprooted, selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. We feel a man is unthinking when he says that sobriety is enough. He's like the farmer who came out of his cyclone cellar to find his home ruined. To his wife, he remarked, "Don't see anything the matter here, Ma. Ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing?"
I'm just going to say this is one of my favorite paragraphs in the entire book. It is so well written. It is so even to a person in this room, almost to a person, I can say is going to raise their hand and say, I've been like a tornado and roaring their way through the lives of others. Hearts have been broken, sweet relationships are dead, affections have been uprooted, selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. I mean, my gosh, all of us can say that to some level, that's been us. And then just kind of not even caring about the fact that the farm is gone, but and commenting on the fact that the wind has stopped blowing and saying that's just good enough isn't going to be right. You can imagine the farmer's wife standing there and in ruins with her mouth open, just kind of, I can't believe that that's what's important to you. There's not a lot more to say other than from a personal level. I've highlighted and put an asterisk by this paragraph. And if anybody ever asks me, what's your favorite passage in the book? A lot of times I'll come to page 82 at the bottom and say, this is one of my favorites. So, all right, let's go ahead and keep going, Rob.
I just want to throw this in, Leo. When I first came into the fellowship, I thought that I hadn't heard anybody but myself. When I did my, selfish and self-centered to the core, who would have thought that was me? But, when I did my 4th step, I realized that I heard an awful lot of other people, not realizing, in my own thinking that, the whole world revolved around me. Nowhere in this book does it say a living amends is sufficient. It talks about direct amends, face to face. We have to be able to face up to these people. If not, we may drink again. And for us to drink is for us to die. So we have to, and that's why it's so important that we have our spiritual experience and we take God into these things. You know, we ask God, how can I make this amend? You know, Bill has given us some great ways of doing it here. You know, now we're going to go into the seventh amend, which is family. So let me continue. We're on page 83, everybody. Yes, there is a long period of reconstruction ahead. We must take the lead. A remorseful mumbling that we are sorry won't fit the bill at all. We ought to sit down with the family and frankly analyze the past as we now see it, being very careful not to criticize them. Their defects may be glaring, but the chances are that our own actions are partly responsible. So we clean house with the family, asking each morning in meditation that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindness, and love.
Yep, and right there at the very end, that's the step 11. All right, this is kind of what I'm referring to in regards to doing your step 9 when you've started doing your step 11, because you really do want to get that guidance. Long period of reconstruction. It's going to take some time. I'm still, and I mean this sincerely, and I admit it, I'm still working things out with my wife, still trying to make amends and still trying to do the right thing. She happens to be very astute when it comes to what's the right thing to be doing and stuff. And so we actually do, in fact, have some good conversations. I'll call them good, where she is guiding and mentoring me into the kind of person that she needs me to be in order to, you know, one, make amends for the things that I've done wrong, but, you know, be the husband that I need to be. And I have to say that I sometimes need to be reminded. Obviously, everybody has their own faults, and the one thing you don't want to do is do that finger pointing, which is so easy to do in those close, intimate relationships that you have with your spouse, with your children, with your family, etc. And this is not a time for you to be trying to clean their side of the street. This is just another way of saying being very careful not to criticize them. And even though that their own actions are partly responsible, sure, you have responsibility for yourself, not for them. You need to be doing the right thing, even if in the face of them not doing the right thing on their side. And that's where we are now. Rob?
And I just want to throw this in. Amends. An amend is a restitution, to put things back the way they were, to correct a mistake, to put righting a wrong. Saying sorry is an apology. It is not an amend. Okay. We talked last week about a fence. If I'm driving along the street and I take out somebody's fence, me going up to the door and saying, "Hey, sorry, I took down your fence. Hope you can get that fixed, okay?" No. My amend is to make restitution, to make sure that that fence is put back the way it was. Whether I do it or I pay somebody else to have it done. But that is an amend. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. Unless one's family expresses a desire to live upon spiritual principles, we think we ought not to urge them. We should not talk incessantly to them about spiritual matters. They will change in time. Our behavior will convince them more than our words. We must remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness would make a skeptic out of anyone.
Yeah, and yeah, nobody likes it when somebody is in their face or all the time talking about. And in this case, let's an example of, you know, somebody finds religion and then they all of a sudden think that everybody else is supposed to find religion as well. And there's probably at least 1 or 2 times in our life that we've come across somebody like that. You know, again, this is about you. This is about your spiritual experience. It is not what we're talking about with regard to religion. And I think it's the one distinction. While we can say that there is some religious overtones with regard to AA. The fact is, we're really talking about that very personal, very private, spiritual experience that we're trying to get everybody to have, and then living that as it is outlined in this book. Quite honestly, and this is just a kind of a sidebar, but reading the first portion of this book would be great for anybody, even the non-alcoholics. And if everybody lived their life like this, oh my gosh, what kind of a world would this be? So the idea here is that you need to just temper what you've experienced from a spiritual standpoint, and make sure that you're working on the amends and living that spiritual way, but not necessarily forcing and pushing it onto others. That's really all that's being said here. And as a sponsor, you need to make sure that you pull the reins, if you will, back on somebody that is your sponsee trying to do that, especially if they come to you frustrated, like, well, I've had my spiritual experience and why can't everybody else? Hold on. You're going to have to help them get through that part of it and just say, look, it's not for you. And then the other part of it at the end here, remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness would make a skeptic out of anyone. Guess what? 20 years of drunkenness is not going to get washed away in a matter of 2 weeks. And it's so many of us, even me, I've raised my hand that I got upset with my first sponsor. As a matter of fact, I've been sober for 2 weeks and everybody's still on my case. I've said it almost word for word, just like that. It wasn't until I got through the steps, and it wasn't until I had that spiritual experience, and it wasn't until I was able to get into a step 11 on a consistent basis and everything, that I realized that this is a journey and it's going to take some time. And everybody comes to their own conclusion in their own time. So it's just going to take some time. And that is one of the biggest lessons that you're going to be, as a sponsor, teaching your sponsees, is patience and taking time to do it right and having it done right. Rob?
Patience, tolerance, understanding, and love are watchwords. Now we're going to come to the 8th amendment, which is people we cannot see or make right. There may be some wrongs we can never fully right. We don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves that we would right them if we could. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter, and there may be a valid reason for postponement in some cases, but we don't delay if it can be avoided. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scraping. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone.
Yeah. So absolutely, there's going to be some wrongs we can never fully right. Either, I mean, and the scenarios are out there. Either somebody has passed on and there's no way you can go back to that person. Two, there's still some incredibly hard feelings out there, and by reaching out and communicating with the person, it's likely that it's going to just explode again. Maybe somebody has drifted off and you just can't find them, and you don't know how to get in touch with them, and you're just not going to be able to do it. But in all scenarios, and those are just 3, there's more. If you're willing to do it, you've gone through the thought process about how you might approach it, and then you set it aside and say, if the opportunity ever presents itself, immediately when that opportunity presents itself, I will make amends as best I can, if at all possible. Obviously, if somebody's passed away, you're just never going to be able to do it. But the actual steps of going through the process of making that amend sometimes is very enlightening and is very helpful. So I would just say, as a sponsor, if you've got somebody that has somebody that they did, a parent that's passed away, and they were ugly to their parent out there in that time, just walk through it and just, let them know that this is one of those you're just not going to be able to make, but let's just commit to living your life as if you would never do that to another person. And in an indirect way, you can kind of say that had you had the opportunity, this is what you would have done, and find some solace in that process. All right. Before we get to this next part of this, I wanted to talk for just a second. There are three things that I wrote in my book that I want you kind of to think or ask yourself. They're questions, okay? One, are there any more harms I'm unaware of? That you kind of start to kind of think through once you've done your step 4, you've done your step 8, and you're kind of in the process of doing your step 9. That's one thing to think of on a constant basis. It's kind of when you're doing your step 11, you're reviewing in your mind, is there anything else that you're unaware of? All right. Second, do you need to tell me how this hurts you? All right. And that's something you might ask that person that you're talking to as well. And all of these are questions you might ask the person that you're making an amend to. And then, is there anything I can do to fix it? And when I say this, is there anything I can do to fix it? Anything that's legal and appropriate. All right. If somebody gives you an outlandish or bombastic, solution to the amend, and it's obviously illegal, then that's not what we're talking about. All right. So these are questions you should ask another person. It should be kind of like the things you review with yourself before you do make an amend. One, are there any more harms I'm unaware of? Okay, you might learn something there. 2, do you need to tell me how this hurt you? Okay, a lot of people just need to talk for a minute and say what it was that hurt them. And then, is there anything I can do to fix it? Obviously, legal and appropriate. Okay. Rob?
Leo, it is, we have about 7 minutes left. Do you want to do the promises, or you want to save it for next week?
We'll do that for next week. I think that's a good place to stop right here. And thank you for bringing that up for me.
Perfect.
So we are at the point that we asked Bill to say a few words.
Hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey.
Hey, Bill.
Thanks a lot, Leo and Rob. Good job. You explained it very well. Like you said, what's going on here is Bill's giving us a bunch of examples or suggestions on how to make different types of amends. And there may be more types of amends than he has listed here. There may be other stuff that you have to do. And you don't necessarily have every one of these is something that you have to make amends for. But he's giving us some instruction here or some idea so we know what we're doing when we go out to make these amends. Like I mentioned about the amends, about financial amends, you can make the best deal that you need. Like Leo mentioned, sometimes they have a payment plan. You don't have to give all your money to the person that you owe it to all in one shot. If there's some kind of a payment plan, you need to get on a payment plan so that you don't hurt yourself and your family, and you're in the process of completing the amends. And another one, like Leo also mentioned, if you have a criminal offense, you need to talk to a lawyer. We're not trying to get ourselves locked up. When you talk to a lawyer, that's privileged information, so the lawyer is not allowed to testify against you. And you have to be careful if you're sponsoring somebody and they start telling you about a criminal offense, you got to cut them off right away, because a sponsor does not have that privilege of keeping things quiet. If you get called into court and the judge says, tell me what this guy told you, and you say no, you could be held in contempt of court and you can get locked up for that. So you don't have that immunity from testifying. So if one of your sponsees is going to tell you that he robbed the bank, cut him off. Don't tell that to me. Go get a lawyer and talk it over with a lawyer. So you have to be real careful with some of these things. And basically what Bill's doing, like I said, he's giving us a lot of different instruction here on what we do when we make these amends. And like was mentioned, there's no living amends mentioned in here. Most of us know what that living amends thing is. That's somebody that's trying to get out of making amends because they really don't want to do it. And when you make amends, make sure you don't hurt somebody. Like it talks about the wife. Should we tell her if we were having an affair on the side? If she doesn't know about it, it's not a good idea to bring it up. We're not trying to hurt other people. we're trying to,
Whoops. We lost Bill completely.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, we did. Jeez. Wow.
All right.
Somebody didn't like the fact that he wasn't gonna to tell.
Hopefully he'll come back here. That's unfortunate. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and say the Serenity Prayer. If he comes back and we're still on and he wants to share some more, we'll give him the time to do so. Otherwise,
Of course.
that's where we are. All right.
And also, Bill has his own meeting on Fridays. It's 11
does.
a.m. Eastern time, 4 p.m. UK time. If you ever get a chance, it's history, his knowledge of history and who these people are and how they all intertwine. It's really fascinating. He's got a lot of really, here he is. Speak of the devil, and the devil will show up here. Hey, Bill.
yeah, how you doing? Yeah, my call dropped. I got cut off.
Not a problem.
You still have a couple of minutes if you want to go ahead and finish out, Bill. We were just waiting for you.
Okay, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. But basically, well, one of the things that I like in here is this last one, the 8th amends. Bill told us 8 different types of amends in here, where it says there may be some wrongs we can never fully right. We don't worry about them. If we can honestly say to ourselves, we would right them if we could. As long as you're honestly willing to do this, you will get the spiritual benefit out of this step. The guy upstairs knows what's in your heart. He knows whether you're trying to pull a fast one or whether you're really serious about this. And if you're serious about this, that's really all that's necessary to get through this, to get the spiritual benefit out of this step. In other words, I don't have to make some kind of substitute amends. I mean, it's a good thing if you want to donate money to charity. That's a very good thing. That's a godly, spiritual, moral thing to do. And if that gets rid of your guilt and remorse, by all means do it. But I hear people all over these face-to-face meetings claiming that they're giving money to charity to make amends. That's not amends. Amends is giving the money back to the person I took it from. And if you can't find that person, as long as you're willing to give it back, that's what this book says. If you want to give it to a charity, that's fine. But just understand this. That's not amends. If that person ever shows up a year later or whatever and wants their money back, you still owe them the money. You can't say, I don't owe you the money. I gave it to a charity. So just be aware of that. It's a good thing to give money to a charity, but just make sure that you understand that is not completing your amends. So that's basically all I got. Thanks a lot for letting me share.
Thanks so
for
much,
waiting.
Bill. Oh, thanks, Bill. I love the fact that, you give the money to charity and then you see that person and it's like, well, I gave it to charity. Well, you still owe that person money.
Yep.
He always brings it into focus for me. Thank you so much, Bill. And I'll do the serenity prayer now.
All right.
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.